So our next speaker is a product designer on the paper team at Dropbox, which is part of what we've been running layers off of this year. It's wonderful. Previous to Dropbox, she co-founded Memo.ai, which was acquired by Coinbase. So very, very excited to introduce to the stage Liana Dumitru.
Hello, I'm Liana, and I'm a product designer at Dropbox. Today, I will tell you my story, from growing up in a small village in Romania, to moving to the US by myself, to changing careers, all the way to right now, standing on the stage in front of you all. I'll share how I learned, sometimes the easy way, but most times the hard way, just how important inclusion is. And I'll give you some practical tips for what you can do to build inclusive environments as an individual, as a team, and as a company. And on the way, we will talk about purees, guys, communism, salads, and a bunch of other things. So let's get started. Let's first talk about what it means to be inclusive as an individual. And to do that, I'll take you all the way back to the 90s, to my childhood. I grew up in post-communist Romania, in a very homogeneous society that was equalized by 42 years of communist rule. Most everyone I knew was the same as me: race, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. Almost everyone was Caucasian, Christian, lower class, heterosexual, and relatively well educated. Not only that, but all the children in my family were girls. I grew up only around girls, with almost zero awareness about differences between men and women. In my eyes, as I was growing up in post-communist Romania, everyone was the same. In 2013, I packed my bags and I moved to New York to do a master's at Columbia University. On the first day of my master's, a girl with a big, bright smile walked up to me and she asked me enthusiastically, "How are you?" I had had a really, really bad day. So I answered in the most Eastern European way possible: bad. I think I'm getting depressed. Which was a perfectly acceptable thing to answer in Romania, but not in the US. She looked slightly disoriented. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear." And then she turned around and left. She never talked to me again for the rest of our master's program. Most everyone I got to know that first day seemed completely different than me. And it quickly became obvious that that would be the new normal. I would just be very different than everyone. But then I realized something else. Most everyone I got to know in my school and in New York was or felt completely different than everyone else. I had moved from Romania, which was a society that was radically inclusive by virtue of everyone being almost the same, to a society where most people I met felt by default not included, because everyone was so different than everyone else. The US is generally considered a relatively diverse society, and diversity is incredibly important. Study after study has shown that when people from diverse backgrounds get together with a shared purpose, they're likely to create amazing outcomes. And I'm not just talking about businesses performing much better when they have a diverse workforce, which they do, but in many organized groups of people, diversity can foster creativity and open-mindedness. And at the individual level, it can be humbling and eye-opening to develop a relationship with someone who's completely different than you. But in order to benefit from diversity, we need to be able to cooperate with each other. And that's where inclusivity comes in. When a person enters a new, unfamiliar environment, they're likely to feel challenged or insecure. When I moved to the US, I had a lot of moments when I felt like the ground beneath my feet was shifting. I questioned many things that I had previously taken for granted, like, how does a person make friends? What am I supposed to chit-chat about with the server when he hands me my coffee? Am I really extroverted? And if I am, why don't I speak up more often? This feeling of vulnerability is normal, and it happens to people all the time. Everyone here probably had moments in their life when they were in an environment where they felt like they couldn't speak up. And it happens so much more often to people from diverse backgrounds. That's why creating inclusive environments is so important. But what exactly does it mean to be inclusive? Inclusion is a sense of belonging, connection, and community. Inclusive groups help people feel welcome, known, valued, and encouraged to bring their whole unique selves in any context, including to work. Ultimately, a culture of inclusivity is all about authenticity. You are included when you feel safe being authentic. So, how can you personally be more inclusive? For example, if somebody completely different than you joins your team at work. First off, be kind. The value of kindness cannot be overstated. Receiving someone with kindness is likely to make them feel welcome and put them at ease. So do one small act of kindness, like leaving a welcome card on their desk or taking them out to lunch or to dinner. To this day, I remember one of my master's colleagues inviting me to spend Thanksgiving with her family in Arizona. I never went, but just being asked, I didn't know what Thanksgiving was very well at the time, but just being asked felt super inclusive and kind. Next, recognize that you're biased, and be willing to adapt your own beliefs and behaviors. We are all biased. It's impossible to understand all of the values and rituals that matter to every single person around you. Having assumptions isn't wrong or bad. It's part of how people fast-track understanding. But the problem arises when you're not even aware that you're making assumptions. So work to understand your own unconscious bias about what you assume about others. How? Get informed about dynamics between different groups of people. Watch your reactions to different types of people, and be mindful of the reactions that you produce in others. Then, consider each person's unique qualities when you work with them, and adapt to that. For example, if somebody is introverted and likes being prepared, consider giving them time to prepare before you have a meeting with them. Finally, help make the seemingly obvious explicitly obvious. Every group of people has its own rules and cultural norms. Think of how Americans give feedback versus how Eastern Europeans give feedback. Or how formal work meetings can be in Japan versus how casual they can be in the US sometimes. When these norms or rules are considered generally understood, it's hard for new members of diverse groups to know them. I sometimes felt like this when I started working in the US as an immigrant. I asked myself, what does it mean to be professional in the US? and how is it different than Romania? So take some time to document some of the commonly accepted social norms in your team. What do people chit-chat about? What's the happy hour etiquette in your team or in your company? These things may seem obvious to you, but to someone coming from a different culture, it's super valuable to have them written down. In summary, to personally be more inclusive, be kind. Recognize that you're biased and be willing to adapt your own beliefs and behaviors. And help make things explicit and obvious. Now, let's talk about how to build inclusive teams. So let's go back to my story and fast forward a couple of years after I moved to the US. I started a company with 2 other founders. We got funding and created a team. We built a product, and then we sold the company. Ta-da! Well, actually, it wasn't that simple. It almost never is. I started the company with 2 other people, but I was someone who didn't quite fit the pattern of the traditional tech startup founder. I wasn't an engineer. I was a woman, and I hadn't been working in tech for very long. My 2 other co-founders were both male, engineers. They had both started and sold a previous company, and they had both worked at big tech companies before. But because I wasn't a typical techie, I brought unique strengths to the table. I was deeply driven to create a product that was valuable for our users. And from my experience as an immigrant, I knew that to do great work, we had to build a team where every single person's voice could be heard. While we were building out our team, I started noticing things that my co-founders didn't. For example, some people on our team and some of our investors tended to use uninclusive language. Some men on our team took credit for women's ideas. We tended to recruit the same types of people. Guess which one? And we weren't making deliberate efforts to expand our reach. And women on our team were more likely to pick up administrative tasks or write meeting notes than men were. No matter how hard I tried to create an inclusive environment by myself, I realized that we needed more than just myself prioritizing this. Group dynamics are bigger than any one individual. Even if a member of a group is deliberately trying to be more inclusive, if the group that they belong to doesn't care about it, little change will happen. So our entire team needed to be invested in this. Talking with different people, I understood that the team itself, as a group, could be set up in such a way that inclusivity will flourish. So here's some practical advice for how entire teams can be more inclusive. First off, and this might be something that a lot of people could consider obvious and unnecessary, explicitly recognize that people on the team come from diverse backgrounds, and that this means that social and cultural differences will exist. Celebrate those individual differences. This is important because it encourages unique identities. You can think of it as puree versus salad. Teams with the puree approach are like a melting pot. Everyone on the team comes together and loses much of their individual identity as they assimilate into the team culture. But with the salad approach, each person maintains their own identity and contributes their unique talents to make the salad more interesting and flavorful. If you want your team to be inclusive, make it clear that each person's differences are an addition to the team rather than something that should be checked at the door. One of the first things that we did at our startup was sit down together, acknowledge that we all have different experiences and personalities, and talk about why inclusion matters to us. This aligned the team that inclusion was an important priority, if you want to go through a similar exercise, make sure to pick up the Team Values Toolkit that Dropbox is going to start giving out soon. Next, set up processes that make everyone's voice heard and shed light on each person's unique backgrounds. To surface each person's unique background, you can support people to share more about themselves. For example, one thing that we did at our startup was encourage people to create working with me docs. If you don't already have these, encourage your team to create them, because they allow people to explain how they work best and to take pride in their work and values, but also to respect the values and ideas of others. To enable everyone to speak up, we try to make sure that our meetings were inclusive of everyone. There are many small things that you can do that can make a difference in having an inclusive meeting. For example, introduce a structure into the meeting to make sure that everyone gets airtime. Or if anyone is interrupted, call it out and offer them the opportunity to speak again. Finally, give those who come from diverse backgrounds allies and mentors. A while ago, I read a study that said that if you have successful people in your group who look like you or that you can relate to in some way, they can function as a social vaccine that can inoculate you from some of the self-doubt that you might face when you're going through a challenge or trying to think through a hard problem. However, coming from a diverse background can mean that in many work settings, there won't be that many people that you can relate to. That's why having a system for finding mentors for people on your team can be useful. At Dropbox, one of my work friends and I started a mentorship program for designers, and we've heard time and time again from the participants how impactful it can be to have help think through some of the unique challenges that come with being different in some way. So, in summary, here are some ways you can help create teams that are more inclusive. Recognize that differences exist and celebrate those differences. Practice inclusive meeting culture and provide mentors and allies for people from diverse backgrounds. And finally, let's talk about how you can help create inclusive companies. And one last time, back to my personal story. About a year and a half ago, I joined Dropbox. And one of the first things that I noticed is that Dropbox as a company is very deliberate about setting up processes that try to enable inclusivity. Creating an inclusive culture at an organizational level is very hard. You need to have systems that incentivize people and teams to discuss some very sensitive issues. But it can be super impactful. Organizations have the power to change behavior because those systems that they put in place can be inherently inclusive, or blind to inclusivity, or just blatantly exclusive. So what are some practical ways that entire companies can create inclusive environments? First off, being different than the norm should feel safe. So companies should create safe spaces for people coming from diverse backgrounds. A sense of belonging can take time to develop, but you can help nurture it through the creation of special support groups. For example, at Dropbox, we have employee resource groups for people from diverse backgrounds, like Asians at Dropbox, Latinx at Dropbox, or Black Dropboxers. If you have ideas for such groups, speak up, find allies, and try to make it happen. Because these groups offer support, celebrate the unique qualities of the people that belong to them, and allow them to take pride in their identity. Next, organizations should deliberately seek out and empower grassroots initiatives that foster inclusivity. Whenever someone expresses interest in creating a project that can make your organization more inclusive, nurture them, mentor them, and guide them. Give voice to people from diverse backgrounds and have them tell their stories often. For example, at Dropbox, Kate Apostolo, one of our product designers, had an initiative to make women's voices more heard in the design organization. She named it Ladies Get Loud, and she did so many activities to help empower women designers. She interviewed them, she told their stories to leadership, and she organized workshops for them. If ignored, these types of initiatives can simply wither and die. Or if nurtured, they can grow beautifully into something that can make your organization more inclusive. Finally, the physical space can be inclusive or uninclusive too. Many physical spaces in today's workplaces can be more suited for men rather than women, or for Caucasians rather than people of color. People who feel like they don't fit into the space can sometimes automatically assume that they don't belong there and just leave. So physical space can act like a gatekeeper. For example, gendered bathrooms could make gender nonconforming and transgender employees feel like they're not welcome or like they don't belong. So companies should alter the physical space to accommodate diverse backgrounds, personalities, and experiences. Add decor that is representative of a wide range of races and beliefs. Have furniture that works for various body types and ages. Offer unisex bathrooms and nursing rooms in your office. And finally, as an individual, as a team, and as an organization, celebrate diversity and inclusivity. Celebrate every small and big win, and always strive for more. Whenever I see small acts of inclusion in my team or in my organization, I get incredibly excited. My journey from feeling safe and included in a homogeneous society to feeling excluded as an immigrant is a journey that a lot of people find themselves on in some shape or form. We feel included in certain places or settings or with certain groups of people. And then other times we feel excluded, disregarded, or shut down. Building a diverse team of people who feel safe being authentic is incredibly powerful. It not only results in much, much better work and better products, but it also makes coming to work every day a joy. To do great work and to grow as individuals, we need to be personally invested in including those who are different than us. And we also need to build teams and organizations that are aware of differences and inclusive of everyone. Personally, I would never want to go back to living or working in a homogeneous group of people. The slightly uncomfortable but incredibly exciting feeling of getting to know somebody who's completely different than you is just too damn fun. Thank you.